And we're back. Welcome back. Mike Cernovich here. Apologize for the hair. It got rained on in DC. I wasn't expecting the weather, so we gotta get this hair fixed up. But that aside, we have some cool things planned, just so you know, if you're in the Washington, D.C. area. Tonight, we're hosting we call them a MAGA meetup. These are very important events to connect with other like minded patriots. We always have a great turnout. There's a picture on my Twitter of the kind of people who show up. It's always a great time. That is tonight, Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in Washington, D.C. at the Trump Hotel. Just come on out. We're all in the bar area. We just hang out. There's always, 50 or 100 of us connecting. So yeah, there's a picture from the last time. We always have a good time. Community is important because the fake news media wants you to feel isolated, and that's not even everybody who shows up. There's always way more people there, but not everybody wants to be in a picture. So the fake news media wants you to feel like you're isolated and alone, and we're everywhere. And that's, again, why I talk about being recognized in public. It isn't to brag or even that I care. It's just every time I'm recognized in public, that's a patriot right there. Every time somebody says, hey, Cernovich, I know right away, wow, there's another, even in D.C., at the swamp. We're in the swamp right now. Patriots everywhere you go tonight. There'll be patriots everywhere. And then Sunday at noon, we're hosting a rally against political violence in front of the White House. I have heard that actually InfoWars may be live streaming the entire event. I don't have final confirmation on that, but we were, I'll have Periscopes and YouTube Live and everything. And that is this coming Sunday at noon. It is a rally against political violence. Jack Posobiec will be there. Roger Stone is going to be there. Laura Loomer, who you saw from Shakespeare in the Park. Cassandra Fairbanks, Lucian Winters, Mike Flynn Jr., Allie, Anna Kate, Mike Cernovich. It's going to be a big event. We're going to have a lot of people. It is going to be a lot of fun. And that is this Sunday, June 25th at noon in front of the White House. And you can find that information on the Facebook page or, follow twitter.com/CERNOVICH. All over there. Now, the reason we hold these events is because you feel alone, because everywhere you're bombarded with violence from Hollywood, fake news, they make it seem like we're some kind of fringe movement. They make it seem like there are only few people. I'm more mainstream than people in the mainstream. Alex is more mainstream than I am. There are patriots everywhere, so our job is to connect all of you. And there's also a hashtag, MAGAMEETUPS, MAGA meetups. Not UPS like the store, it's more like ups. So MAGA meetups is a hashtag. So if you want to start a local event or you want to meet like-minded patriots in whatever city, you can just go on Twitter and type in hashtag MAGA meetups, or you can follow the Twitter account at MAGAMEETUPS. And so the important thing is we have to unite as patriots. And we have to network with each other too. We all know everybody here. Here's the official MAGA meetups page. You can follow MAGAMEETUPS on Twitter, because everybody listening to this knows that feeling that what if people find out I'm a patriot? If my job finds out I'm a patriot, I'm going to be fired. If people find out I'm a patriot, maybe they're going to be violent. Who knows what is going to happen? It's so important that we connect with other like-minded people in the real world. That's very, very important. And by the way, Alex has been very generous in helping sponsor these events. And that's why the InfoWarsStore.com is so crucial. Is a lot of people are like, oh, if I go to the store, what does it even matter? This is the kind of thing to get the coverage. This is what pays for events. This is what gets people out to Washington, D.C. to do a live stream of these rallies that not everybody can attend to. So even when you can't make it out of the house and you can't make it to one of our events, by supporting the broadcast at InfoWarsStore.com and buying the toothpaste and taking the nootropics and all the great testosterone products, you're actually bringing more people together, because we are the resistance. Speaking of the resistance, we now are going to have Katie McHugh on, she was actually recently fired from Breitbart over a tweet, which, based on what Breitbart writes in the articles that they write, a lot of people would think, well, wait a minute, why was she fired for tweeting out essentially what Breitbart talks about all the time, which is the link between radical Islam and terrorism. So if Katie's on the line, how you doing?
How you doing, Mike?
Doing great. Thank you for being able to make it today.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on.
So, for those of you who don't know, maybe briefly introduce yourself.
My name is Katie McHugh. I worked for Breitbart for about 3 years. I was a homepage editor, a radio producer, a reporter, copy editor, sort of a jack of all trades. And I worked very closely with Steve Bannon, and that was an incredible experience. However, the company has certainly changed since he left because his personality was the driving force behind, nationalist populist movement and Breitbart News itself.
And you helped him with his XM radio show, right?
Yes, he picked me out of everyone on the company's in the company, and said it was a great honor. So it was so great to work for a boss who was, total pedal to the metal. Everything he did was for the audience, for the callers, for our readers, and at the same time, we were totally ideologically aligned.
So, what is that like a little bit? What is it like working with somebody like Steve Bannon?
Steve is always on. I think he sleeps about 2 hours a night. So, him and Trump both have that kind of extremely high energy kind of lifestyle. Trump himself sleeps about 4 hours a night. Steve would get up at 2 a.m., work on show prep for 4 hours. I would get up at 5 a.m., immediately mail him the show clock. And then he would do 3 hours of radio. And we'd book, sometimes 9 guests, sometimes 10. While at the same time, he's taking all these calls from people across the country. And then he would get on our 9 a.m. editorial call and then circle back with radio at 9:30 in the morning. And so that's all before 10 a.m. And some people haven't even woken up by then. So, and Steve is just absolutely brilliant, has so much vision, and he keeps his promises too, because you can see in the White House, he still has that whiteboard up left of everything he wants to accomplish in Trump's first term. And he keeps track of all these things and checks them off. So he has your back, he'll never betray you, and he was just a fabulous boss.
So I'm glad that you mentioned that because it is fake news. The fake news narrative of Steve Bannon is he's some like schlubby guy who just lays around and hides out and doesn't really work. So you're saying that that's completely fake news.
That is absolutely fake news. Steve is the hardest working man I've ever met in my life. And, just because he's not in front of the camera all the time, doing press briefings doesn't mean that he's just sitting around on his butt, not helping to make America great again. That's totally false, totally fake news.
Yeah, I'm so glad you say that because a lot of people don't appreciate too the how much work and preparation and everything goes in. Somebody like Alex Jones or somebody like Steve Bannon, you don't just show up and talk. You have to be addicted, and it has to be kind of like your life passion or life purpose, or you're going to burn out. And Steve definitely has always had that vision, hasn't he?
Yes, he has. And, the company was his life. And even just producing the radio show with him, you're up at 5, you're working on the show, following up with callers who call into the show with news tips. You're thinking of the next guest for the next day while tracking the news cycle, trying to plan the flow for the show. So, yeah, you had to be on all the time. And I just find all these descriptions in the fake news media, Steve is like some slovenly person, just despicable. They're very offensive.
He's also an avid reader, isn't he?
Yes, he is always reading, and like Trump, his mind is plastic. He never stops learning, and he's always digesting new books. And when I was producing the show with him, we were getting a constant inflow of new books, and so my reading expanded voraciously while working for him. So and it's amazing because while he's doing all this work, he still takes like an hour or so every day to read something new, learn something new. And I think that's a great model for all of us, all of us patriots. That's something that, that's a habit we should have.
Yeah, and that's one story that has actually really bothered me is that Steve Bannon is one of the few actual public intellectuals that we have. And conservative media never gave him his credit. They would talk about William F. Buckley or, Rich Lowry's not an intellectual. He's not an interesting person. Nobody at National Review is doing anything interesting. But there was never a media narrative about Steve Bannon giving him the credit he deserves as probably one of the most great right-wing intellectuals of our time.
Oh, I totally agree. And I think, they're making the same mistake as Trump by trying to call him like unkept and lazy, because Steve's a genius. And he's a predator. And so I think they're just drastically underestimating him, and that's going to hurt them. I also think it's interesting, too, that I think Steve is the only person who's gotten in trouble and bad press for his reading list. I've never seen the press go after someone for reading books that they didn't like. So, they want to even censor that and make sure that, patriots like us can't connect and can't even, just share book ideas.
Yeah, it was interesting that the media was triggered that he was reading a book called The Best and the Brightest, which is an ironically titled book because the people that we consider the best and the brightest during the Vietnam era, the Harvard kids, the Yale kids, Ivy Leaguers, they were actually the people who led us to this catastrophic failure in Vietnam. And we sort of have the same thing going on with the neocons and the Harvard kids. Oh, we'll go to Iraq, we'll go to Afghanistan. The people that we view as the best and the brightest, the so-called elite, they aren't elite at all. So the media was really triggered that he was reading a book because they view themselves as the best and the brightest, even though they're not unique or interesting at all. I mean, you work in DC media. Is it true that they all kind of think alike and they're kind of boring to hang out with?
Yeah, they are. And you can see this play out on Twitter too, where all the little blue checks are retweeting each other and making snarky comments. It's all just a game to them. Steve is a very serious person, which is why, he's reading it. And I think that offends the media because they realize that they're being shown up by someone who works much harder than them, is much smarter than them.
That's why they hate Alex too, is they want to dismiss him as whatever, but he's always on. He never stops thinking. So we need more positive attention to the virtues of these kind of public figures. And again, that's a story that is incumbent upon us to tell. So you had mentioned Steve had a killer instinct. Now here's what I've heard, and I'm gonna qualify this for all the drama mongers at home. I want Breitbart to succeed. I am happy Breitbart exists. I have linked to Breitbart and sent probably at least 1 million clicks to their site. I am not hating on or shading Breitbart. However, as a journalist, I will tell you what I have heard. I have heard that once Bannon left, Breitbart is now being run by lawyers.
Yes, that's true. And I want Breitbart to succeed as well. I want to go back to Andrew's vision, and I want to have Steve's energy. I really wish them all the best. However, I think that they're nervous about the intense media scrutiny on them, since Steve, of course, went to go work for Trump and his White House chief strategist. So they stopped following up on critical narratives that got big play under Steve. For example, that horrible gang rape of that little disabled girl in Twin Falls, Idaho. Management did not want to touch stories like that because they are pretty radioactive and they are explosive. But this is what the people want. And this is something that a nationalist, populist minded group should discuss. We should ask about why are these third world refugees here? Why are they living in slums? Why are they giving cheap labor to different factories and while little girls are getting raped? Do we vote for this? Do we ask for this? Why don't communities have any control over that? And it's just surprising to me that Breitbart is shying away from that kind of critical discussion.
Why do you think that is?
I think because, well, in the case of the Chobani yogurt factory, which is located near Twin Falls, the person running it is of a Turkish descent. I think he's a citizen. He was naturalized, and he likes hiring a lot of these refugees on the cheap to keep producing his yogurt. However, a lot of these people are very litigious, and I just think Breitbart has a lot to worry about right now with their advertisers, things like that, and they don't want an expensive lawsuit, to come crashing down their heads.
I've also heard too, and it's just, and this is the way I interpreted Breitbart is run by lawyers, is as a lawyer myself and working with lawyers. If you want to be told why you can't do something, then ask a lawyer for advice. If you say, I want to start a media company, they'll give you 10 reasons why it's a bad idea. Lawyers are not visionaries. Lawyers are risk averse, and they focus on that 1% of the risk and say, well, you better not take this shot because there's this downside risk that it maybe was only 1%. So I interpreted Breitbart as run by lawyers to mean that they don't want to take big risks anymore.
That's exactly right. And there's nothing wrong with that mindset, but that's dramatically different than what Steve did. I can't see Breitbart with a kind of, truly, like I said, killer instinct right now because they are concerned about so much risk.
And the story, so what was like the assignment? Like I know for a fact that they had a major story. I'm not gonna scoop them, but I know for a fact that they had a major story that would have sent shockwaves. It's a national security story. It would have sent shockwaves all through DC, and they decided not to run it. Are big time stories getting killed inside Breitbart?
Well, Breitbart had an approval process, and some stories would just inexplicably never get approved. They sit there for hours. Even simple things like I was trying to write up an FBI report, an internal report, not classified, that came out stating that the media is directly responsible for these executions of cops in the streets. There's 50, 60 cops that were murdered, in 2016, 2015. And a lot of these were from people who were ginned up by media reports on Ferguson, et cetera. And they would just go out and they would shoot a cop. But Breitbart didn't want to touch that because it did have, the FBI did talk about like the racial element of, the black man getting shot by the white cop. And they just decided, well, there's 1% chance that this could be a backlash on us, so we're just not going to run the story. So yes, they have killed a lot of stories. And one thing I encourage our listeners to do is go to Lee Stranahan's thepopulist.tv for some of the stories, especially on, the SPLC, the Frankfurt School, the Twin Falls narrative that Breitbart killed.
Yeah, and I'd also heard too that there was a meeting, and this is a direct quote that I got from one of my sources. Somebody at the meeting had said, we want to be more like The Hill. Is that anything that you heard or culturally you felt was happening?
Yes, absolutely. And, there's a time and a place for that, but Breitbart's trying to be all things to all people, and it's not going to work. And, they want to be, they've said publicly, we want to become the right wing version of the New York Times. Well, you're Breitbart, and I feel like they're trying to run away from the legacy and the reputation that gave them their success. And I think it's a mistake.
And that's exactly why I told a lot of my friends at Breitbart, I said, you're not going to outhill the hill. You're not going to out Politico. Your value proposition is that you're covering news and information that nobody else in the mainstream media is going to cover. That's your value proposition. That's what people go to your website for. That's what they expect. And if all they're going to get is another saccharine, basic talking point on the story of the day that they can find at the Hill or the Politico, then why go to Breitbart?
Exactly. And becoming the right wing version of the Huffington Post, that's you're not distinguishing yourself from the herd. And Breitbart should be pursuing these stories, these, hot button stories that maybe other legacy media will touch and ridicule them for covering too. We always get ridiculed for covering illegal alien crime, even though it's 100% preventable. And it's something that people care about. So I really hope that they return to their old legacy. They realize that, the direction they're going in is a mistake. And I just wish them all the success in the world.
Well, I think I don't want to get my facts wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't Ann Coulter have her column serialized at Breitbart, and they cut out a link that she had included to a map of violence against Trump supporters?
Yes, Anne's column on how leftists want to kill us, which is frighteningly true, had a link to American Renaissance, which is a white advocacy group, very famous, was founded in 1990.
Back with the last segment with Katie McHugh. It's been a great conversation. We're talking about journalism, the future of media. Before we finish the segment off, I want to remind you tonight, the Trump Hotel, 7 p.m. Washington, D.C. We're having a MAGA meetup. Come on out. Follow the at MAGAMEETUPS account, MAGA Meetups account. Connect with like-minded fellow patriots. We're everywhere. You're not alone. It's such a lie. I'm so tired of that being treated like some kind of fringe group, like we don't belong, like we're outcasts. We are the mainstream. We are the majority. We're taking back what is rightfully us. We're the good guys. We got to quit acting like we're in the shadows because these liberal medias, these pedophiles threatening assassination. Seth Rogen's mocking a guy who was stabbed 7 times in the chest, saying, oh, ha, 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 I hope that guy has health insurance. He doesn't, but I do. He's going to have to go fund me. They're making fun of anybody who doesn't have the kind of money that they have. Johnny Depp advocating the assassination of President Trump. Madonna threatening to kill Trump. Kathy Griffin. All these pedophiles in the media, the pedophiles in the DNC, they won't hand over their server. They are the pedophiles. They are the people covering things up. They are the murderers. They are the psychopaths. They are the reptiles. So it is time for us to show up in public. We're not hiding anymore. We're not going to let the streets belong to these vile, disgusting, wicked, duplicitous, demonic people. Tonight, Trump Hotel, 7 p.m., host your own MAGA meetup. We're also having a a rally against political violence. We're going to do that in front of the White House, Washington, D.C., this Sunday at noon. I do believe InfoWars will be live streaming, but I will double check that. And so watch the live stream if you can't make it. If you're near DC, come on out. I'll be there. Jack will be there. Roger Stone will be there. Cassandra, a lot of great people, a lot of fellow patriots are going to be there. Katie McHugh, what is the future of conservative media? Alex wants to do a massive expansion. He had told me who is on your wish list of people, and I had mentioned a few names. I'm not going to go, over all of them, but I'd say that I think Katie McHugh is one of like the greatest talents right now in media. So what is your advice for the future of right-wing media, conservative media, whatever, populist media, nationalist media, whatever it is that we want to call it?
I would say absolutely be happy warriors and stay engaged with your audience. What you and Alex are sponsoring, these MAGA meetups, are so important because the media does try to make you feel ashamed, alone, atomized, cut off from everyone else. They do not want us to practice freedom of speech. They do not want us to practice freedom of assembly. They want us scared and alone and separated from each other. So I think the future of conservative media will be bringing readers together in physical space to get together and form a real movement.
So what would that look like? Brainstorming the idea, what would that look like?
Well, I think having spontaneous MAGA meetups across the country is a great idea because it all starts in the community. I think that all of us patriots should be rooted in leaders in our communities and be connected with each other across the country. So, in your hometown, you can just say, all Trump supporters, let's get coffee on this morning, Sunday morning after church, and just, keep building a community and keep making strong ties, and don't let the media, gaslight you into thinking you're alone and there's something wrong with you.
And also, we need more people doing YouTubes, Twitter, social media, even if it's on knitting. We need all patriots to just kind of be out there and to unite. So I want to give you the last sort of 30 to 45 seconds. What is new in media? What is going on? What do the patriots listening need to do?
I think that everyone should follow your model and Jack Posobiec's model of getting on Twitter, getting on Facebook, and doing periscopes.
We need to get in their faces, legally and lawfully. Yeah. More of that takeover. Right. Thanks so much, Katie, for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I hope to see you at one of these MAGA meetups one of these days.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate it.
Our pleasure. So you just heard from Katie McHugh. She's a great up-and-coming rising star and a star in her own right in right-wing media. Everybody, thank you so much for listening in, and thank you so much for your support. I will see you next Friday.